series title Rumiko Takahashi's name, several sticker-like character illustrations, and the publisher's logo, Egmont Manga. At the top we see a woman in a white kimono. Unfortunately, she blends a little into the white title text, making it slightly difficult to read. Below the logo, we can see Ranma in the foreground, with Akane and Panda in the background. Ranma 1/2 is mostly a nostalgia series for me. I watched the anime many years ago and always enjoyed the mix of comedy, romance and gender-swapping aspects. One thing that stands out when revisiting the old anime is how differently it approaches censorship. Seeing nipples never really bothered me back then because everything felt very natural within the story. In modern anime, it sometimes feels a little strange to see characters with completely smooth chests, almost like seeing a person without a belly button. It also creates a weird contrast to how other body parts, like female breasts, are often emphasized. Looking back, I find the old approach in Ranma 1/2 surprisingly refreshing. It fits the playful and comedic tone of the series and never felt out of place to me. Now let's take a look inside and read the synopsis of Volume 12. Pantyhose Taro's back, and he got a thirst of vengeance that can only be quenched by dunking Apose in water from Drowned Man's Spring. But the water might actually result in more trouble than he anticipated. In fact, double the trouble. Then a zesty trio in search of a particular treasure inspires Ryoga, Moose, and Ranma to form a truce. But is their temporary alliance a recipe for disaster? Volume 13 has a pale purple cover feature for characters, including Ranma and Ryoga. The placement of the text works a little better here, although I still think the minimalist design occasionally sacrifices readability. The characters look as they are in the middle of a tense confrontation. Action scenes have never really been my favorite part of Ranma 1/2. What makes them still somewhat entertaining to me isn't the fighting itself, but the absurd situations that usually develop around them. Often, the side characters can be surprisingly oblivious, which is part of the comedy, but also a little frustrating. They often avoid dealing with the drama that could come from hiding their secrets or handling situations when someone discovers the truth. Maybe the later volumes explore this more, but for now I feel like there is a lot of untapped potential in that aspect of the story. Let's see what happens in this volume. Ranma's latest challenge is Furikan Ai's newest teacher, Hinako Minomiya. She can drain an opponent's energy and transform from a childlike statue to a tall, sultry siren. Will Ranma defeat Hinako, or will he be the one who's schooled? Then Akane reunites with a boy from her childhood who's dying of a wound she inflicted on him when they were young. With his fatal wound on her conscience, will Akane choose to stay with Shinosuke until the bitter end? next volume has a beautiful warm yellow-orange cover. The blue details in the character designs contrast wonderfully against the background, making everything stand out nicely. This might be one of my favorite covers from this batch. I'm also a big fan of older manga art styles. The artwork in Ranma 1/2 feels elegant, expressive, and very characteristic of the 1980s. While the style isn't as common today, you can still find it in modern manga. It sometimes reminds me of titles like Go For It Nakamura or the works by Oshimi, which are among my personal favorites. Let's admire the artwork while I read the synopsis. Home is where the heart is, except when it's invaded by unwanted guests. Ranma's teacher, Miss Inako, falls in love with Akane's father and moves into the Tendo dojo. But when Ranma tries to drive her out, Miss Hinako gives Ranma a run for his money. Later, a Ranma imposter takes up residence in the heart of Modoka, Ranma's mother. It doesn't take long for the two Ranmas to begin fighting, and not just over their true identities. Volume 15 returns to a light blue background. The warm reds and pinks of the characters work especially well against it, creating a really pleasant color combination. Looking at these covers has also made me think about book design in general. Sometimes publishers focus heavily on creating a modern aesthetic, but readability can suffer as a result. This isn't limited to covers either. Manga occasionally has very small text, low contrast, or dialogue placed too close to the binding. If you don't have any visual impairments, this might not be a major issue, but it can still make reading less comfortable than it needs to be. Let's flip through the volume and see how this edition handles it. The Egg of the Phoenix is a legendary treasure and pounding a headache for Ranma unless Ranma can force feed the bird into maturity and thus free himself from its attack. He will be one on the bottom of the pecking order for the next 100 years. Will the bird have the final word? As well, Ryoga makes a potential love connection with a breeder of sumo wrestling pigs. But will his alter ego Pichan cause a misunderstanding with dire consequences? Volume 16 has a big background and features Ranma wearing a golden yellow training outfit. One detail I particularly like is the visible watercolor texture in the artwork. Watercolor has always been one of my favorite traditional art mediums. We also get both versions of Ryoga on the cover, his human form and his pig form. Ryoga has always been one of my favorite characters. He's kind-hearted, passionate and endlessly unlucky when it comes to finding his way anywhere. His terrible sense of direction creates so many funny moments throughout the series. His clumsiness actually reminds me a little of Play It Cool Guys, a manga built almost entirely around lovable characters making awkward mistakes. Let's see if we can spot some good Ryoga moments while we flip through. Ryoga plus new disciple Akari plus Akane plus a magical umbrella equals a complicated equation of dueling love. Next there's a swimming contest between Akane and Miss Inako that leaves one of them taking a dive. Then a legendary doji armor set to endow its wearer with ultimate powers is given to Ranma, Genma and Sun, but when the doji picks Akane to be its wearer, it soon becomes between her and Ranma. It's now or never for Ranma to confess his true feelings for Akane, but will he? Volume 17 has a fresh spring green background and features several characters in fighting poses. This volume is wrapped in plastic, which might make it look brand new. Interestingly, I bought some of this volume second-hand and they are the only ones wrapped. I was actually very lucky with this purchase. Most of the books arrived in excellent condition, despite some being pre-owned. Buying manga online always feels a little like gambling. Shipping damage can happen even with new books, and sometimes second-hand copies arrive looking almost untouched. Let's take a look inside this one. Ryoga and Ranma will stay forever young unless they eat a special mushroom at just the right time. But Will they survive their squabbling over not wanting to share, or are they two Chitages out of luck? Then Akane's got a secret, a brand new and bigger bra waiting to be tried on. But when Ranma suggests that Akane's chest size may be shrinking, Akane goes from upset to enraged. And the arrival of Ranma's mother, Nodoka, only adds fuel to the developing battle of the busts and bust-ups. Volume 18 has a very balanced color palette with purples, blues and touches of yellow. The cover feels especially cozy and welcoming. The flowers and fruit decorations add a softer and more romantic atmosphere. Speaking of romance, that's probably my favorite aspect of Ranma 1/2. I love romance stories in general, although I'm usually not the biggest fan of extremely slow burn relationships. As the series progresses, Ranma and Akane clearly grow closer, even if neither of them is willing to admit it. Their constant denial can be charming, but it also tests my patience from time to time. This volume moves things forward at all. Girl-type Ranma uncovers a cursed mirror that makes a love-hungry copy of her who kisses everyone she can get her hands on, including boy-type Ranma. A magical compact can capture the cookie copy, but then Ranma and Akane get trapped inside the compact. Later, Akane wins an enchanted bathing suit that finally enables her to swim. In return for the suit, she must enter a swimming competition. She takes the lead in the race, but a dangerous surprise awaits her at the finish line. Volume 19 has a very calm and peaceful cover. The light blue background, both versions of Ranma smiling and his father holding a sign saying, "Darling, I'm a panda," all give the cover a surprisingly relaxed sitcom vibe. As I get closer to the ending, I find myself wondering how everything will be resolved. Will the curse ever be cured? Will Ranma learn to fully accept both sides of his identity? Personally, I think the second option would be the more interesting direction. Because the German new edition contains some extra content throughout the series, it doesn't line up exactly with the English edition. Most volumes are only shifted a little, but the difference becomes more apparent in the final volumes. So we will arrive at the final English synopsis once we reach the last volume of this edition. of this edition, I was completely surprised. Ranma and Akane are dressed in elegant white clothing, and Akane is even wearing what looks very much like a wedding dress. Naturally, I assumed this meant a wedding was finally happening. My curiosity immediately got the better of me, so I looked it up online. As it turns out, the illustration was simply meant to show what the characters might look like in the future, rather than representing an actual event from the story. I understand the reasoning behind it, but I have to admit the cover definitely raised some false expectations. I haven't checked the actual ending yet, but finding this out still left me a little upset. Let's take a look through this volume while I read the final synopsis to you. The outrageous, entertaining and beloved stories of Ranma and the gang come to a conclusion. Will Ranma break his gender-flipping curse? Will anybody find a way to reverse the effects of the legendary cursed springs? Will Moose get shampoo? Will Kuno finally get his little red-headed, pigtailed girl? Will they panty-stealing Abusei buy for enough undergarments to complete his collection? And the ultimate question, will Ranma and Akane get married? And those were the remaining Ranma 1/2 volumes that I needed to complete my collection. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the series, especially if you have already reached the ending yourself. If you enjoyed spending some relaxing time with me today, feel free to leave a like, comment or subscribe. Thank you for watching or just listening. I hope you have a wonderful day or wonderful night's sleep. See you in the next video.